Let's get ready to rumble! He's taken another one, and Howard Foster has stopped it! Wow!
This is Thomas Lyons from Reps on TV. I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Luke the Duke Watkins on the phone, Commonwealth Cruiserweight champion, unbeaten, 13-0. How you doing today, Luke?
Yeah, very well, very well. It's good. I'm glad it's the weekend. I can have a nice rest. I've had a hard week in the gym this week. So.
Very good. So before I go in depth, talk a variation of topics related to boxing. I'm sure we could sit here all day and talk about boxing, but I've specifically going to address some different topics that are relatable to your career. So you've got a scheduled fight, your next fight on the 3rd of March in Swindon. Is there anything you can tell us about the event, the promotion, your opponent, anything you'd like to get off your chest about that?
The event is No Retreat, No Surrender, next Saturday, the 3rd of March. I'm sure there'll be some standard tickets left available on the all the VIP tickets and tables are sold out. I'll be fighting in the 10-rounder. We was trying to defend the Commonwealth, but we had someone pull out, so we're looking for, Paddy, my management and coach, he's looked and secured a new opponent. He's just finalising things regarding that. It's going to be a good show. There's a lot of homegrown talent on the show from Swindon, the likes of Ryan Martin, Harry Webb. We've got Beck Connolly. The lads are going to kill me. Whenever I'm talking, I can never remember names. We've got Bradley Cole. Yeah, we've got good talent. Sam Smith is fighting in an eliminator, I believe, or it will be for the Southern Area title. I'm not really 100% sure what's going on that, but it's something's up for grabs. Excellent.
So, in terms of now the domestic scene, the cruiserweight division's thriving at the moment. We got the current British champion MATTY ASKIN. I actually put out a poll today suggesting to the boxing fans to give their opinion about who they feel is the leading cruiserweight contender, champion, prospect within the mix. Just touching on one of those, Michael Lawal, 6-0 cruiserweight, who's fighting with the Sauerland brothers. He's been signed by the Sauerland brothers. He had a good win last weekend on the George Groves Chris Eubank World Boxing Super Series card. What's your thoughts on Michael Lawal as a fighter, and is there anything you've seen of him that you think could be potential fight down the line for yourself?
In all honesty, I haven't watched much of him. I've heard of him and I know who he is. I remember when he signed with the Sauerland brothers. But I actually haven't watched him. We've been in contact now. We spoke about sparring and stuff. I believe, because he's based in North London, so I think
Stonebridge.
We will end up sparring with him, before the time comes that me and him will be looking to be rivals. I have heard his name. I pay attention to what's going on and who he's about, and I've heard he's got talent. So I can only be the judge once I know. Exactly.
And from seeing a load of footage of yourself, interviews you've done in the past with various boxing platforms, you come across as a very down-to-earth, genuine guy, fighter, person outside of the ring. So do you feel in terms of the current crop of cruiserweights, it's not really a sense of, getting under each other's skin, it's more to do with the business side of things?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you speak to most of them, I think everyone's willing and happy to fight everyone. This is business, so get the contract sorted out, cross the T's and dot the I's, and then I'm sure myself, I'm happy to fight any of them, and I'm sure they're happy to fight any of us.
Yeah. And when I lined this interview up with you, the first thing I actually wanted to ask you was about the British Beef card we saw, the first Matchroom show of the year on February the 3rd at the O2 Arena. I was in attendance myself. What did you make of the whole, the expectation of such a big show and two undefeated cruiserweight prospects putting it all on the line? What was your assessment of the night?
For point of view for both of them putting it on the line, I take my hat off to them. Fair play. That's what the sport's about, and it's nice to see that they got the balls to do it. The fight, it is what it is. Sometimes this happens. This happens not only just at domestic level, but this can happen at world level. Sometimes two fighters just don't gel, and the fight doesn't catch fire. And it's just one of those occasions. But sorry, and going back to the overall night and the hype and everything, the build-up, yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm a boxing fan as well as a fighter. So I enjoy watching all the commotion going on and the drama. It's nice when it's not yourself involved and you're just sat back watching. Yeah.
And in terms of that fight, if you were, say, in the footsteps of, let's just say, Isaac Chamberlain to start with, it seems that he didn't really, live up to the, it might have been the pressure of the night, the event, but it didn't seem that he really got into his rhythm as such, and what we kind of expected from the outside for him to, showcase his boxing skills, the perceived better boxing skills than Lawrence Okolie, despite having that GB pedigree. Do you feel like it would have been a different situation if it was yourself in the ring that night?
Yeah, definitely. 100% it would have been different. But the thing is, I can't be the judge of what was going on through Isaac's mind. I see the tweet, and you can't believe everything you see. You have to take everything with a pinch of salt. But on the social media platform, I did see that Isaac went in there with an injury, and if the injury was as bad as what I read, then fair play to the man for staying in there for 10 rounds. It shows a heart and life.
Yeah, 100%. And now moving on, we've got Frank Buglioni, the current British light heavyweight champion. We've heard that you've been sparring multiple rounds with Frank, not just in this camp for your fight and for his fight scheduled against Callum Johnson, who's also a Commonwealth champion himself in his own respect. Can you tell us about how those spars, not necessarily how the spars went, but the experience of sparring such a big name like Frank Buglioni?
Yeah, it's nothing but a good thing to be doing. It allows me to raise my profile a bit by sparring with Frank, because he's quite a high-profile guy in the game, and I enjoy it. Frank's a good man. He comes to work. I come to work. We both shake hands before. We have great sparring. Then we're both on our ways. It's very enjoyable.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear the competition between two, hungry fighters, and that spars can be, a learning experience as such. I think that's the main objective of a spar, is to, get each other's, experience from different sides, physically, mentally, and being able to execute that in the ring on fight night, I think, is probably
Absolutely.
So moving on to another cruiserweight that's been mentioned with yourself. He's been around a long time. He's always been in good fights. Wadi Camacho. Now, I don't want to come across as disrespectful to Wadi, because I know he's a top fighter who's willing to fight anyone. But would a fight with Wadi Camacho be a step back or a stepping stone for you, pushing you in contention for the Lonsdale belt?
It wouldn't be a step back. It would be a step back if I chose to fight him. He's behind me, and he's doing what he's doing, and he's trying to put himself in a position to fight for the Commonwealth. And if he becomes a mandatory challenger, then I'll fight him, because as a champion, that's my obligation, and that's required of me to defend my title. So I'm not looking to fight him. If the fight happens, and if it makes sense because of obligations to being a champion, then I'll do it. But if not, no, I'm on my own agenda. I want to fight MATTY ASKIN. So I think a domestic unification fight is the biggest fight out there.
Yeah. So it's actually a similar situation to Buglioni and Johnson in the light heavyweights. Is that the MATTY ASKIN fight the one fight you just want to get your grips, you want to get your hands on?
At the moment, yes. He is the man who I want to fight. He's the man that has the British title, so he is the man I want to fight. I know he fights Stephen Simmons on March 17th.
Yeah.
I'm going to go there, watch it, be ringside, and I wish both men best of luck. I'm sure they're both training hard. At this moment in time, Matty is the champion, so I want to fight him. If Stephen won that fight, I'd want to fight him.
Yeah, definitely. So now moving on to the world scene at the cruiserweights, We've seen the ongoing World Boxing Super Series pioneered by Kalla and Nissa Sauerland, a great platform for boxing, where it sees the best fight the best and puts all the politics commotions to the side. We've got Alexander Usyk with a great background with the Olympics and a great amateur pedigree versus Murat Gassiev in the final of the World Boxing Super Series. Usyk got there by beating Marius Bradis, Gassiev in his own respect beating Junior Dorticos. Assessing both performances, who would you favour in the final?
On both performances, I couldn't pick. They both performed great. But I am going to back Usyk. I think he's just got a bit more than Gassiev. I think his movement is going to play a big factor in the fight, and his experience. This is where it can really come into play. But saying that, Gassiev has not had many amateur fights, and look at the level he's at. So is Gassiev like the real deal? Because people can do it. People don't have to have all these massive amateur pedigrees to be a good pro. The pros and the amateurs are two different games. You're in a 3-minute round over 3 in a little sprint. These world title fights are not that. They are marathons. They are sprints inside marathon. They're two different games when it comes to that.
Yeah. And actually, I think this would bring up a very interesting debate with the World Boxing Super Series platform. Do you think a British Boxing Super Series would be a great idea at this time with the crop of cruiserweights?
100%. I think it would be great. Why not? It would raise everyone's profiles off the back of the World Boxing Series. That's already heightening the viewing on boxing at the moment. So yeah, definitely, I think it would be good. Everyone's at domestic level. It's not like we've got 3 or 4 down here and then we've got 10 up here. No, We've got a whole chunk of the division in and around domestic level. Yeah,
definitely. So now outside of the current boxing talk with all the different topics being raised at the moment, I just wanted to ask you, Luke, how did you get into boxing? Was it a traditional reason, such as maybe losing weight or staying out of trouble? How did you? What was your experience of growing?
I was just shy of 18 stone. I was about 18 stone, fluctuating in and around there. I was at the age where I was going out, partying, drinking. I was just finished college. I was working in a bar. And a guy suggested to me, "Oh, mate, it's just a bit of heavy fat. Boxing would be good to lose weight. You got good frame for it." So I went, did it, and now here I am.
Brilliant, honest, very honest. You're from Swindon. You're fighting in Swindon on next weekend. I just want to ask: is being the only recognised top? Well, I don't want to say only recognised, but recognised boxer from Swindon, does it put a bit of pressure on you to perform in front of your home fans, or is it an incentive to carry the flag for the south of England?
I have to stop you there because I don't know if you know Jamie Cox, who fought George in the World Boxing Series.
Oh, he's from Swindon as well, isn't he?
He is from Swindon, so he's further along in his career than me, and he's getting the recognition in his career that he deserves. Yeah. But yeah, I am certainly flying the flag for my hometown, and I'm sure he is as well.
Yeah. So
he is. I'm not sure I can see what he's doing. He is flying the flag. As well as the other fighters we've got there. Yeah,
definitely. And it's good to see there's a lot of examples, like from my hometown and from Harrow. There's a lot of there's not too many boxers that you'd hear about, and I think with terms of going around the country to see small hall shows, see fighters that are just doing something to propel their profile, get the exposure they need to be able to raise up their profile and move up the ladder. I think it's great to see boxers that have achieved so much like yourself in such a short space of time to be able to document what you're doing and be able to put your town on the map. I think it's great.
Is 9 years a short space of time?
Possibly not, but...
Man, I've been grinding away. I just haven't had the same profile. I haven't had the media as such, like, you know, these other guys get the backing of, because media is very powerful. I haven't necessarily had that.
Yeah.
But I've been grinding away. Don't get it twisted. I have been working, and you know, you hear the old cliche sayings that the harder you work, the luckier you get, and that's it. I believe the more I put in, the more I'm going to get out of the sport, so I'm willing to put everything into it.
Yeah. And going back to the fight between George Groves and Chris Eubank Jr., focusing on the main event, what was your judgment of the fight?
Yeah, I thought George scored him. I thought it was the best he's ever looked. He looked like a complete fighter. You've seen snippets of George, like, showing certain aspects of his game plan, you know, being world class. You know, one fight he might have world class power, world class speed. He might have world class movement, but he really showed everything that he is capable of producing. I thought it was a really good performance from him. I was surprised that there wasn't a stoppage. I was surprised at that, but there's not always stoppages in boxing. They're both good fighters. So it was a good fight.
And it seems to be after the fight that the performance of Eubank, you know, the underperformance of Eubank sort of overshadowed how good Groves was on the night. Focusing on the Eubanks, what is your opinion of the whole attitude, their persona, the old man not necessarily helping his son, you know, in a way that what people have said? We saw Prince Nassim Hamid's comments on ITV Box Office afterwards, his commentary of the fight. Yeah, what is your opinion of the Eubanks?
I have no opinion on them, because really and truly, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't. They say this and it gains attention, people talk about it, and that's what you want. That is how you sell yourself. You get people talking. So do we know really if that's giving him no advice? Because I know if it was my son, I know I'd be giving him advice.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. I make no opinion on it, but maybe he might make some changes going forward. We don't know. Yeah.
So do you think it's a case of that he needs to make those fundamental boxing changes? He has Ronnie Davis in his corner, and we saw what he's done with the likes of Chris Eubank. So do you think it's a case of, you know, Chris actually, you know, listening to someone of that knowledge and calibre?
I always think two sets of eyes are better than one. And people aren't established coaches for no reason.
Yeah.
It's because they are proven, you know. They've gone there, they've worked with fighters and proven themselves. So maybe it is the case of him getting another set of eyes. You can't always see everything when you're fighting. You can't get the same breakdown. So listening to someone on the outside is very, very wise. Yeah.
So in terms of your ambitions for 2018/2019, we've got a question from Ryan Prower at R Prower. He's asked, what is the aim for the end of this year, Luke, and what is the target? He's put in brackets, belt or opponent in the works.
I'm British and Commonwealth champion.
Nice and simple.
I just got to make sure that I win, make sure the British champion wants to fight, then we're going to get that on. And then by this year and next year, I want to be defending that. I want to be raising my profile, put myself in position to be in big fights. I want to be on the big stage. I will be on the big stage.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time.
And I think in terms of the boxing fraternity, I think we need to give a lot more respect to fighters like yourself who've worked up from the grassroots, the foundations of the sport, boxing on small hall shows, now rightly deserving of a higher platform, a higher media exposure. I know it's not the exposure is great, but I know that the sole goal in the sport is to become world champion. So yeah, do you think in terms of that, comparing to say someone like Joe Joyce, who's come through with Haymaker Ring Star and the platform he's been given off the back of his GB pedigree, do you think there's like a comparison there to be made between traditional ways of moving up the sport and then having that platform to build on with GB and the Olympic side of things?
No, I think there's just different routes for different people. everyone's got their own path and everyone's doing their own thing. I think it's a good thing for people to come through the GB and the development and go through the squad and do that. It does put you on a higher platform straight away. The public know you are, people around the world know you are automatically. But I don't believe that's the only way to the top.
Yeah.
There is many ways to the top. Many ways. And myself and Paddy will just figure out our way to the top. Yeah,
definitely. So another fight, another massive domestic dust-up on the 5th of May. We've got Tony Bellew and David Haye fighting in a rematch. Obviously, we've touched on the cruiserweights, and obviously Bellew being the emeritus WBC champion. In terms of Tony Bellew, do you think he'd be able to handle the threats of the current world elite level cruiserweights, the likes of Usyk, the likes of Gassiev?
Yeah, I do. I thought Tony performed very well in his last fight. Forget David Haye's injury, because that didn't come until around the 8th.
I think it was the middle of the 6th or 7th, from what I can remember. But yeah, later on in the fight, yeah.
But Haye unleashed at the start of the fight, and Bellew dealt with it. He dealt with everything he was throwing at him. He got caught a couple of times. This is boxing. You don't swim in and don't get wet. You go boxing, you're going to get hit. That is what happens, unless you're Lomachenko. But I think Tony could definitely handle and be right up in that mix.
Yeah. And I think it's I don't think Tony gets the respect he deserves, really, with in terms of his boxing ability. I think even he alluded to himself in the press conference the other day about, Haye loading up, making him miss, hitting fresh air, and not the typical, in his prime David Haye that we've seen. I think it's a case of, what has David Haye got left in the tank? And I think Bellew demonstrated and was able to orchestrate, a good game plan to be able to evade the punches, to be able to, slip at the right time with the influence of Dave Caldwell. So do you see the rematch going the same way, or do you think Haye will be able to sort of find a revitalisation in himself?
I think mentally he can find the revitalisation, but I don't think physically his body can keep operating at that level. He's had quite a few injuries over the last few years. Can he get through the fight? I don't know. I don't think it's the best Haye that we've got anymore, due to the fact, he's gone up and over the hill. I'm not saying he's far down the hill, but he's definitely on the way down on the other side of the hill. So that's my comment on that. Yeah.
And another outstanding boxer in his time, recently announcing his retirement, Andy Lee. What's your thoughts on Andy Lee's retirement, and do you feel that he might have deserved a final pay day, an opportunity to fight on the world stage again?
Yeah, definitely. Everyone deserves that. He's been great for the sport. He's a great guy. He's one of the nicest guys around. He's honest with the sport.
Yeah.
So, and he's been in some good fights. He deserves to be paid. It's a shame this sport can't pay everyone evenly. That's not the way it works, and I understand business. But yeah, he deserves it. And I'll never know how much money he's made, so it's none of my business to know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be nice for him to be in one massive fight before the end of his career and retire nicely.
Yeah, 100%. I think the general consensus is that not just his boxing, but his just outside of the ring being such a genuine, down to earth fella. I think it's credit to the sport and being such a good servant to the sport. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And another fighter who's I don't know to say, on the brink of maybe coming back for a final fight, but I think at the time being now he's retired. But Andre Ward, a potential hint of coming back to cruiserweight to fight the likes of Tony Bellew, or even him making quite a brash statement in moving up to heavyweight to fight Anthony Joshua. But what's your thoughts on that?
Moving up to heavyweight is a massive jump for Andre Ward. I don't know what he walks around at, but if he can do super middle and then light heavy, he's going all the way up to heavyweight nowadays. Like in this generation, that's quite a big jump. Back generation of James Toney, it was doable. The men did it, and it wasn't that drastic. But I think the size difference for guys now is huge. You know, the average weight out there is like 17 and a half stone with these big monstrous heavyweights. But I think he can come back and definitely get in the cruiserweight mix, and his skill alone will be able to deal with them. And I'm not necessarily saying he will win, but he can definitely come in and mix it up with those guys.
Yeah. And another massive fight on the Cinco de Mayo weekend. We got the rematch, another rematch. It just seems like boxing is booming at the moment. But we got Canelo versus GGG, the rematch. What was your thoughts of the first fight, and do you think Golovkin was hard done by?
Yes, I think Golovkin was hard done by. I think he beat him. Clearly, I've watched that fight a couple of times. I think he beat him. And I think if it happens again, Canelo will have to really change a few things. Not stand there so long, maybe. I know I'm not the man standing in front of Golovkin, but not standing there trying to trade with him, maybe getting his tax off, getting out of the way, you know, and make Golovkin chase him more. But who knows? I think Golovkin has the beating of him again. And
do you think that when Golovkin's opponents come up against him in the ring, do you think it's the difficulty of nullifying him coming forward and having such an aggressive front foot style that it's just so hard to, if you're not a great counter puncher or that's not where your strengths lie, do you think it's difficult then to be able to find a way to beat him?
Well, that's what game plan for.
Yeah.
You and your team should spend 10 to 12 weeks putting a game plan together, how to neutralise the opponent. So that's Canelo and his team's job to do that. I think it can be different, but unlikely. Yeah.
And the Golovkin holds, the majority of the middleweight belts, but we've got one of our own, Billy Joe Saunders, who has the missing piece to the jigsaw with the WBO middleweight title. How would you see Saunders fare against Golovkin if that fight was to be made later this year, if GGG was be able to prevail from the fight against Canelo?
I think Billy Joe can beat him. I think we saw the best Billy Joe yet. We've really seen his boxing ability, and I think Billy Joe can make anyone miss. He can really box around anyone and just dance, and I think he could do that to GGG.
Yeah. And another question I think has been asked with the involvement of the World Boxing Super Series. I just wanted to ask, besides the Cruiserweight division, what would you say is the best division at the moment in boxing?
Yeah, I would say Cruiserweight, but there's a few divisions. The welter, light welter, light middle, all that up there. That's a very, because the weight isn't too far apart, so these guys will fluctuate in and around this weights. That's very good. Super middle is very good. Heavyweights, great. British and world scene of heavyweight is good. It's all good at the moment. Even the lighter guys, the likes of the Yafai, I think he might be fighting Charlie Edwards. It's all exciting. That's all. As long as it's exciting, as long as people want to watch it, it's good. I don't really care what weight it is.
Yeah.
As long as there's a bit of trash talk going on and people fighting and putting it on the line, man, I'm happy to watch it because I'm a boxing fan.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the one thing about boxing. It provides that excitement factor that gets everyone tuned in, and I think that's the great thing about all these massive domestic world title fights. And like you said there, Yafai and Edwards at Superfly, I think is a great fight. But even the welterweight division, and actually touching on a former fighter who's campaigned at welterweight and fighting on the same night as yourself in Sheffield. You got Kell Brook coming back, making his return against Sergei Rabchenko. Do you think that the moving up to light middleweight, not having to deplete himself to go back down to welterweight, is going to help him move on in his career?
I don't know. I think his last fight was a psychological thing. If he's mentally ready, because obviously the eye injury, it messed with my man's mind. I think with regards to Kell Brook, it's waiting and see what happens with him and on the night and how he handles it, how he handles taking being hit again. Because he's going up in weight, so the punches are going to be heavier. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and again in the States, the same night we've got Deontay Wilder defending his WBC heavyweight title against Luis Ortiz. Now there's been a lot of it's been a very contentious topic that's been raised in the last few weeks, months, about keeping boxing a clean sport, and obviously we've know that Luis Ortiz, not being the only athlete boxer in the heavyweight division to be found out with performance enhancing drugs. But do you think that as Tony Bellews said about this situation, that so-called drug cheats should be banned for life in the sport if they're being able to advance their performance using these substances?
Yeah, I do. I don't agree with cheats. They should be banned. But at the same time, we have to be very careful. I was watching the Olympics lately, and one of the Russian skiers, and they've had heavily, and this is the words of the press from the Olympics, so it's not my words. They've had heavily regular drug testing all the way up, and obviously in their country, certain supplements are allowed, but they've gone over to Pachang or Pachang or something. They've gone over there, and one of the athletes has been done because he's taking something, and it's not allowed. So it's a very grey area. If something's allowed here and something's not allowed over there, we should just have one governing body that says no to all these substances and whatever it is, and that's that. And then if that was the case, then if you're caught with anything banned, you're not allowed that here, you're not allowed that there. But drug cheats should be banned. Yeah.
And just finally, because I don't want to take up any more of your time, but thanks for giving me a good half an hour of your time. It's really appreciated. But tonight we've got, I'm sure you're just as much as a big boxing fan as you are boxer yourself. Tonight we got the return of BT Box Nation, first Frank Warren show of the year, featuring the likes of Daniel Dubois, Anthony Yard, Zelfa Barrett in a very good 50-50 fight with Ronnie Clark. Clark's been, he's taken Martin J. Ward the distance, who's the current European super featherweight champion. Got the likes of Nathan.
I hate to say this, and please don't think I'm disrespectful. There's a lot of people that won't know who I am, but I don't know who those two fighters are. I know the name Martin J. Ward. I've watched Martin J. Ward fight before.
Yeah.
But those two, I could not put name to face or face to name right now.
Oh, that's no worries. So as I was saying, we got Dubois, Yard. I'm sure you've heard of Yard with obviously sparring Frank Buglioni. Them two have been back and forth about a potential fight. Got Nathan Gorman as well, who's another heavyweight. So will you be tuning in tonight to watch that?
I think we're going to watch Callum Smith.
Yeah, his World Boxing Super Series.
Yeah, because the enjoyment of the World Boxing Series, I think I'll watch that. But, it's one of those things. I might flip between the channels. I'll enjoy this fight, flip back to that fight.
Yeah.
But so I will watch it all. I will catch up and watch it all. If I don't watch it live, I will have watched it all by tomorrow evening. Yeah, I'm
kind of glad that you've brought up actually Callum Smith, because I was going to ask his opponent, his change of opponent. It was supposed to be Jürgen Bremer. Now he's fighting Nicky Holtzgen. I think that's how you pronounce his name. 13-0, former 7-time world kickboxing champion. So it's sort of, what's your opinion of crossover sports in terms of, guys coming over to the boxing game? We saw obviously last summer with the whole shenanigans with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, but such a great thing for boxing, to be able to expose such a massive event.
It could happen. If you've got the skill and you can do it, then do it. I think Callum Smith's going to whoop this guy's ass. But if you've got the skills to do it, do it.
And what chances do you give Smith in the final if he was to face Groves?
Oh, man. I really don't know. A lot of people, me personally, I think Groves beats Callum Smith.
Yeah.
I think Groves beats him.
Okay, nice. Well, anyway, thanks, Luke, for giving me some of your time again. And just a final message to your fans, where they can go to buy tickets for your fight next Saturday in Swindon.
You can visit the Trifecta's website, which I believe is like trifectaboxing.com. Follow the links through there, or iBoxing Tickets, I believe is the other one. You can get tickets through them.
Yeah.
Check me out on social media. It is the Duke Watkins. You can search my name across all platforms: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Tune in. It's social media for a reason. Talk to me. I don't bite. I socialise with people on social media.
Yeah. Definitely. And thank you for shouting out your social media outlets. I'm sure everyone that watches this interview will tune in, and there's some big things and big fights for you down the line. So again, thanks very much for your time, Luke.
No worries.
I'll just stop this recording now.